All right, now we're recording. Welcome to Serving Specific Student and Family Populations. This is the first of 4 opportunities to attend this training. So thanks for joining us for the first one. So I wanted to give a quick intro to who we are as your facilitating team today. So my name is Joey Heilman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Education Strategy Specialist at Building Changes. And I'll pass it off to my coworker, Sammy.
Morning, everyone. My name is Sammy Iverson. I use she, her pronouns. I work for Building Changes as the Senior Manager of Education Strategy. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to pass off to Marette.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. My name is Marette Tikla-Alron. I'm the Director of Practice Innovation here at Building Changes. And I'm so excited that you guys are here. I'm passing it on to Kayla.
Good morning. My name is Kayla Blau. I'm a consultant for Building Changes and previously worked in shelters and school districts. I'm excited to be here, and we're excited that y'all are here. So please put your name and your title and pronouns in the chat so we can know who's in the room. We'd also like to acknowledge the Indigenous people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial and who still inhabit the area today. Building Changes is on the land of the Duwamish and Coast Salish people. And just in the context of this conversation, we want to acknowledge the violent history of boarding schools that have impacted Native youth.
A few housekeeping things with Zoom. I know y'all are used to it at this point, but one key piece is if you are looking to get clock hours, please make sure that your name in Zoom appears as you enrolled in PD Enroller. So you can use that little rename option by hovering over and hitting those 3 little dots. It is important that the name on your Zoom matches the name in PD Enroller when they take attendance later. Please make sure you're muted when you're not speaking. Take bio breaks as needed. We don't necessarily have a good built-in break today. We've got a lot of great content, so please make sure that you can take that time to step away. This is recorded. If you do miss something, you can go back later. There is a live transcript available, so you can, I say that, and then I always need to double check that the live transcript is actually available. So it is actually available now. So that should that can pop up if you would like it. You can also hide the transcript, change the font size, all of that. And then please use the reaction buttons. We love interactive as much as we can. Raise your hand during Q&As and add questions to the chat as they arrive. We would love to hear your voices. And one last piece before we move on, I'm going to drop the SurveyMonkey link in now. You don't fill it out yet, but just in case you have to log off early and you don't get this link at the end of the meeting, I want to make sure that you have access to it now. We really appreciate your feedback and value it as we continue to create these trainings. I'll pass it to Sammy.
All right, so just to get us plugged in today, we have a couple of slides introducing Building Changes and the work we're doing with OSPI. As you can see on the slide, our vision, mission, values. Some of you may have heard of Building Changes, maybe not. Just in case, we're a nonprofit working with and alongside communities across Washington State to explore the intersections of systems serving young people, students, and families experiencing homelessness. Some of our work involves funding innovative ideas, providing technical assistance and training, project and program research and evaluation, and advocacy efforts that aim to change policies and strengthen implementation. On the next slide, you're going to see our statement on racial equity. Building Changes has committed to center racial equity internally and externally. We bring a targeted universalism lens, coined by John A. Powell, to our work, which acknowledges equity rather than equality. We no longer believe that everyone should receive the same level of support, but believe in prioritizing the needs of those most marginalized. By doing so, there's a universal benefit. To be clear, this is not about preference, but about acknowledging that people are situated differently and have varying needs. Simple example of targeted universalism are ADA sidewalks. They're built to accommodate wheelchairs. Those ramps also benefit skateboarders, strollers, and the wider community. On this next slide, you're going to see an infographic Building Changes put out in 2018-2019. We've included this to ensure we're centering our students furthest from educational justice and access to resources and opportunities today. We know that 6 out of 10 students experiencing homelessness are students of color. If we think about this in layers, we know that there's about 42,000 students experiencing homelessness in our state. Roughly 3/4 of that population are students living doubled up, largely due to financial hardship with friends or family, which also means they will not qualify for mainstream housing resources. And 60% of this population are students of color. So our research has shown doubled up students have equally poor academic outcomes as their literally homeless peers, meaning housing stability is a key factor in furthering student learning and academic outcomes. This is why our focus on equity and targeting strategies for students of color is absolutely vital in stabilizing our McKinney-Vento population and will benefit all students. And then here's just a slide on our education team and our work with OSPI. You may have seen us back in 2018, 2019. We partnered with OSPI to deliver the annual McKinney-Vento training. We've been in partnership for years and are excited to continue this work together. As some of you may already know, we will be providing 7 total trainings, and each will be offered 4 times between now and September 2023. We are a mighty team of 3, plus our amazing consultant, Kayla. And all 3 of us are passionate about preventing, ending student homelessness and supporting those advocating for those students at every angle of this effort. We've all worked directly with students in different capacities in our careers and really feel genuinely privileged to be with you all today and for future trainings. I'm going to pass it back to Marette.
Thank you. So like we shared, we do have a jam-packed agenda. This training is a little different because we have a lot more guest speakers. We like to call them subject matter experts. So we just went through the introduction. You got to learn who the building changes teams are and what building change is about. We'll go into a fun breakout room where you guys will get to know each other. There'll be activity guiding question, and you'll watch a spoken word performance in just a little bit. We'll do a quick overview of McKinney-Vento and student support programs, and we'll have guest speakers in between. And then we won't have time for a break, so we are gonna ask you to take your own bio break, but feel free to engage in the chat box, tell us to slow down when we need to, and ask a lot of questions. Because today's objective, we want you guys to leave with understanding of programs and resources available to meet the needs of students experiencing homelessness. Some who may also qualify for other student support such as Headstart, ECEAP, ELL, Special Education 504, and CTE. And I know I just said some acronyms, but we're gonna break down what these acronyms mean. We're gonna make sure that today you have a deeper understanding of school districts and student support categories and services. We want participants to hear from speakers on how they're serving specific students and their populations. And again, ask a lot of questions, get to know the population, get to know what advocacy supports are out there. So before we proceed, do we have any questions? Feel free to come off mute or ask in the chat box. And the chat box is pretty active. Okay, all right. If we don't have any questions, we're gonna move on. We're gonna play this piece by Kristen Page. Kristen Page is an Emmy-nominated spoken word poet, professional speaker, and educator who speaks at school conferences and events. He was born and raised in Tacoma, and he currently lives and teaches there. He believes that our voices are our most powerful tool and resources for others to use their voice to advocate, interrupt, empower, and teach.
All right, so I'm gonna hit play, and if it is super choppy, please let me know and I will stop the screen share and try one more time to make it a little more flowy. So just let me know.
They called us low income. They called us at risk. Always speaking from a deficit, didn't realize that my learned experience was prerequisite to be a leader in this community. How could you ever really know unity if you've never seen the broken? They tried to slam the door shut, but my man Tim held it open. See, they forgot to call us scholars. forgot to call us. Knowledge dip sociologists, unapologists, polished with dreams of being our brother's keeper long before it was common in politics. See, we were the seeds that nobody expected to be trees, but we tend to supersede expectations, defy statistics. Never standing complicit, see leaders aren't just in our titles, it's synonymous with our existence. We were the roses that grew from the concrete, became the garden that grew from the ghetto, became the forest that grew from the forgotten, proceeded without caution, never waited to blossom. See, this is the part of the story where somebody finally saw them. It started in a garage. Humble beginnings in its early stage where teachers who cared worked extended days without extended pay just to see their students walk across that prestigious stage and not holding regular diplomas. No, see, these were degrees for change. They gave us the tools, watered our seeds, never looked surprised at what their investment would bring, a network full of leaders from the Hill to the CD, educated and ready to meet the city's needs. We changed campuses, brought perspectives to private schools, navigated the unspoken rules of colleges that weren't built for us, with stories too unique for the common application, collected determination in a cadre and formation. We made an impact that could only be measured in scientific notation. We became teachers, preachers, scientists, activists, counselors, lawyers, employers, nonprofit founders, and PhDs. But ultimately, when watered, we became trees. A wise person plants seeds so the descendants with no shade. The investment that was made receives returns every day. What started as little ripples has now become waves, and generational trajectories have been completely changed. Now this is community development. And it doesn't start with tall buildings, renovations, or detaining our youth. It starts with homegrown leaders unafraid to speak their truth, able to bear fruit because they're connected with deep roots to a city that raised them and respects what they do. When a community stands together, the mountains become movable. Lights in the collective are too bright to be dimmed. We didn't love our communities because they were beautiful. Our communities are beautiful because we love them. So don't call us anything that starts with a deficit. Call us scholars, call us leaders, call us change, call us trees, and discover what happens when you decide to water a seed. Call us the future, and watch us as we continue to bear fruit. And what they told us was the desert.
Yes, such a powerful message, and we are so grateful to have Kristen Page representing and a teacher and an educator, and to our scholars, our leaders, our future. We can share the link, but you may need permission to share it beyond here. So I do want to give that caveat, but the link is available on the public page. So we're going to switch over to our breakout room where you're actually, today's activity, you're going to reflect on the message that you heard. And what you heard actually with each other. You're going to introduce each other. You're going to find out who's in the room, what region of the state are you representing today. This is a challenge by choice, so your name, your pronoun, the school district you're representing, or maybe even just the community you're representing and how you're showing up today. We have 3 questions, and we'll put this in the chat box so you'll have it when you're in your breakout groups. But in these questions, you're going to answer, how are student populations and demographics in your districts changing? Please be specific in identifying what and who you see. Are there demographic of students that could better be served by your school or district? Feel free to answer how. And what tool do you hope to gain to better serve every student equitably? And that mysterious 4th question is reflecting on the message that you just heard from the spoken word artist. Like I said, we'll share this in the chat box, so we're gonna break you out in breakout groups shortly, so just accept it, and we'll see you guys in about maybe 20 minutes or so.
All right. Hey, Mariah, could you actually drop the questions in the chat box before I put people into rooms?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, now I'm going to send you all off. We will return in about 10 minutes. So look to be pulled back out of your breakout rooms at about 10:25. All right, we hope that you had some really great conversations. I was able to sit in briefly in a room, and it was really incredible to hear about your different communities and the work you're doing. I'm gonna pass it off to Sammy.
All right. Just to, again, get us grounded in kind of our student focus and population today, we just want to cover a couple slides about McKinney-Vento and unaccompanied youth. So according to the room that I was just in, we were definitely very heavy on the McKinney-Vento side. So I just don't want to be preaching to the choir here, but we always think it's good to just kind of acknowledge McKinney-Vento in case we have partners joining that might not be as familiar. So the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, we know, is a federal law ensuring immediate enrollment and educational stability for homeless children and youth. We know that it's designed to address barriers that homeless children and youth have faced in enrolling, attending, and succeeding in school. What we have linked in this slide is our training that we offered, one of the first trainings we offered in this series, which was a McKinney-Vento deeper dive, just tries to spend more time in some of the key pieces of McKinney-Vento. And then on the right side of the slide, we're just kind of naming, we know what the law says, but we also know that sometimes that doesn't always play out or looks very different in every community. We know this work is very dynamic, can be highly unpredictable, and requires really a wide range of skills. We know it takes a village to serve this student population, and we know that sometimes capacity and staffing does not always match up with needs that we're seeing. We also know this is an underfunded mandate. So we just want to name all those key pieces to McKinney-Vento. And then on the next slide, just going to be revisiting who is eligible for McKinney-Vento, and we really want to focus on that individuals who lack a fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence. So we want you to think about how to help the students and families you're serving to really meet that eligibility and to be identified so they're able to access McKinney-Vento resources and what the program has to offer. We know the need is high. I know that in our breakout room, we heard about extreme numbers increasing over the last couple of years, and that's showing up in our communities in different ways. We also still know that the numbers we are seeing are often lower than they are in reality. So qualifying students for this program takes really the whole community. And we also want to always say this, that documentation should never be a barrier to accessing McKinney-Vento services. So we also are going to offer some links in the chat, as well as how to contact our state level McKinney-Vento Homeless Ed office if you have any lingering questions, or if you want to learn a little bit more about the program if you're not as familiar. We'd welcome you to check that out. Now we're going to go to Kayla.
Thanks, Sammy. So like Sammy said, I know there's experts in the room, so I'll just kind of buzz through these, but unaccompanied youth under McKinney-Vento is a youth that meets the definition of homelessness and is not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. So some situations for unaccompanied youth may be that they ran away from a violent home, or based on their sexual orientation and the rejection of that from their family, they had to flee their home. But the main part to remember is that the youth has the right to choose what school would best fit their interest, and typically they can enroll themselves. Next slide, please. And so all students that qualify under McKinney-Vento have right to immediate enrollment, which means that there should be no delay. So if you're working with a family and they say, oh, the school said I can't enroll my student because we don't have access to their immunization records, under McKinney-Vento law, that should not be a prohibitive barrier to get immediately enrolled in school. And on the next slide, we can talk, so I know there's a lot of liaisons in the room, so y'all can probably speak to this in your own districts, but families can get connected to McKinney-Vento through a student housing questionnaire, and the McKinney-Vento staff can conduct an intake, and after that is processed, then they can work on the identification, enrollment, transportations, and the provisions of support provided.
So as we kind of transition, like we said, we know there's a lot of McKinney-Vento's liaisons in the room, so you know everything that we just went over. And now we're kind of transitioning into this, the programmatic different population side of our training. So looking at the different support programs that are available in schools. So this is a non-exhaustive list, and these are some of the acronyms that Marette spoke about earlier, and you may already be super familiar with them, you may not, but we're hoping today to be able to talk through them a little bit more and how they can connect to your role as a McKinney-Vento liaison or your role as an advocate for a McKinney-Vento identified student. And I will pass it to Marette.
Awesome, thank you. So these next several slides will show the student support programs or categoric programs and how McKinney-Vento program can work in tandem. So it's in partnership and collaboration. It's this and that, it's not this or that. So the goal is to get you guys fully aware of how these programs can work well together, and accessing the most important part is that the student is receiving services, but also that there's funding that you can tap into. And so a lot of this is, we're gonna drop links for the information, but there also are experiences and how we felt that we were successful when working with these programs in our capacity in McKinney-Vento programs. If you have strategies or examples of how well you felt that you collaborated with your partners, feel free to put in the chat box. Again, today's session is to be very engaging and familiar with strategies that are happening across the state. So I'm gonna start with the Headstart and ECEAP program, ECEAP, Early Childhood Education and Assistance Program, and this is for children ages 3 and 4. Headstart is funded by the federal government for children ages 3 and 4, and in some location, maternal pregnant women and birth to age 3. Headstart Family Service staff can work closely with the McKinney-Vento liaison and homeless services and housing partners to promote collaboration and stability. For my example, when I worked in Seattle, it was pretty awesome to work in partnership with our Headstart case managers, or we call them sometimes family service. Some of them were also language support, so they work specifically with the language population. And you know, if it was a car seat, a booster seat, transportation, if it was our providers like Denise Louie or Neighborhood House or another partner, ECEAP Headstart program, making sure that they were accessing services that were available to them. Oftentimes when you're doing the intake and you're working with the kindergarten through high school student, you realize there's an extra bonus child with them. And you know, you may ask the parent, are they enrolled in school, or do you need support and resources to enroll them in school? And so, you know, that kind of got the conversation going and the family trusting us to see, oh, there's more services that all of my children, like a whole family, can actually seek McKinney-Vento services while also receiving other student support services. So I'm gonna skip over to the McKinney-Vento liaison portion of it. The Headstart and early Headstart programs must prioritize children experiencing homelessness for enrollment, which often means that children experiencing homelessness or foster care are placed at the top of the waiting list. In some areas, I know that there is some buffer space or slots available for students that are high mobility. It doesn't guarantee you a spot, but there's usually some buffer spots available for immediate enrollment for particular students. Also, Headstart and early Headstart programs can reserve up to 3% of their funded capacity for children experiencing homelessness or in foster care. If your local Headstart programs are full, assist families to apply and to indicate that experiencing homelessness so that they may go to the top of the wait list or fill one out at reserved spaces. Now, if your school district has an in-house Headstart preschool program, they also have access to your McKinney-Vento liaison and McKinney-Vento services. So again, sometimes that is a booster seat, or so they can get on transportation if your district provides transportation for your Headstart students. Any questions or examples or resources that anyone wants to share about their partnerships with their ECEAP, Headstart, and McKinney-Vento program? Is it going well? If things going well? Yes, thumbs up.
Hey, Marette, this is Angel. I would just like to, share a couple of things that I'm doing right now. Although I'm not in the Head Start capacity, but in the high school capacity, I will say that right now we're working on caps and gowns for our seniors. We do the transportation, but tutoring support. We also are offering like financial assistance in the form of gift cards, gas cards, rental assistance, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's not a one case fits all, so it's specific by a need base, So those are some things. And I think a lot of times people that are in the McKinney-Vento roles, they don't understand all the resources that are available. Another thing is if a student has fines or fees, they need to be waived, period. We cannot hold the family accountable for fines and fees. So there are so many different things that the McKinney-Vento program can do. Just tapping into those are just a few of the resources. So just wanted to put that in there too.
Thank you, Angel. We're going to get to that part, so we'll make sure we tackle on strategies to accessing those things. We're going to skip over to our guest speaker, Dr. Deborah Sullivan. Dr. Deborah Sullivan, are you in the space? I think I saw you entering. Dr. Deborah Sullivan is an author, educator, researcher. This is her book, her cover page of Cultivating the Genius of Black Children.
Hello. I'm getting a weird message that says I need to unmute myself.
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to exit that note. I don't know what that means. Zoom is getting a little ahead of itself these days as it tries to use artificial intelligence to guess what we really are trying to do when we really aren't. So welcome everybody. I think I'll start off and just tell you just a little bit about the book. And Mahedet, please try just give me signals about timing, and all that good stuff. I wrote the book, Cultivating the Genius of Black Children, because I have worked educating teachers early childhood through 8th grade. And one of the things they often say is how much diversity they're experiencing and not knowing actually where to start. And so my advice has always been pick one group of students and then go deep. One of my degrees anyways is in cultural anthropology. And so I enjoy the process of taking a group of people and learning as much as I can about them. And so what I did was just look at the research around what works for Black children in terms of learning styles, multiple intelligences, adult-child interactions, worldview, cultural expectations, all of those things, and started with W.E.B. Du Bois' work, 1902, and the Talented 10th. And just looked at research decade after decade and researcher after researcher, and if it showed up several times across the decades, across researchers, across the country, across even on different continents, then it got into the book. And the rest of the book is about what would preschool through 3rd grade classrooms look like if that research was actually implemented. So I know that some of you might have some questions that you would like to ask me, but I did want to start with an experience that I had with a colleague of mine who worked a lot with teachers who were working in special ed and also Head Start. And she was having an experience with her 3rd grade son where he couldn't write. There's nothing wrong with his hands, but the process of getting thoughts from his brains down to his fingers onto a pencil to put on a piece of paper just wasn't working. And so his school recommended that maybe he should be placed in special education. And they had a team meeting at the school, and she brought her son. And one of the questions that she asked is, if I put him in special education, are you going to be able to find out why he can't write? And they said, no, probably not.
Echo. Community Connections, Echo speaking.
And then, so she said, well, if I put him in special ed, will you be able to make him write better? And you're like, not sure, probably not. She said, well, then I'm not sure why I would put him in special ed. And the school also had a highly capable program. So, so she asked, you know, her son, do you know the difference between gifted and special education, gifted education and special education? And her son said, oh yeah, that's really easy. Everybody knows that. He said, if you're gifted, they find out what you're really good at and you do that all day long. And if you go into special ed, they find out what you're really bad at and you do that all day long. So then my colleague said, well, then I guess he's going to have to go into gifted. And that was, again, part of the impetus for writing the book is how do we authentically engage families and children in thinking about how do we look for their gifts? Every gifted child has challenges and every challenged child has gifts. And so, so then what does that look like? And with engaging with the parents and the families, I always approach it, and I'm sure a lot of you do exactly the same thing. The way I approach it is I have 3 children. So I approach it as if I were talking to myself about my children when I'm working with families, or as if I'm talking to my brother or my sister about my nieces and my nephews. And that for me just really changes the dynamic. I'm not just serving parents and families and children. We're literally working together because that relationship is important. That's what I would want for my child. And so sometimes it's a very weird experience to be sitting there, imagining yourself talking to yourself, or imagining yourself talking to your own child. But I found that that's been very helpful for me. And so, Mehedet, would you like to ask me a couple of other questions?
Yeah, knowing that representation matters, tell us about how you show up authentically for the students and family you serve. And if you could also tap into some current projects that you're on as you're thinking about targeted approaches to education. I'm just thinking about some of the Rent to Innovation Zone partnership projects, or even the roadmap projects in the other school districts that you're a part of. Feel free to highlight one of them.
Well, I think it's important to keep in mind we all have different personalities. And so what that means is that what's authentic for one person could really feel unauthentic to somebody else. So in order to have an authentic relationship with the parents and the families and with the children, is just bring your best you, because I can tell you what I do, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be really, really good at that. And whenever you approach an interaction, bring your best you. And that might not be like your best professional you, because sometimes professional you sets up like this boundary and sets up like this barrier. So, bring your best personal you. If you're a professional, you'll always be professional. You'll always be that. It's the being personal that makes it more authentic. So just think about what are your best gifts and strengths, and make sure that every interaction you have, you gift somebody with your gifts and your strengths. Make sure that they have an opportunity to take advantage of that. Some of the work that I'm doing with the Written Innovation Zone, and I'm also the past president and education chair for the Seattle Black Child Development Institute, and just working a lot around literacy and math, early literacy and early math. Young children don't know that they're going to struggle to read. Young children don't know they can't do math. Young children just automatically assume it's a no-brainer. I go to school, I learn math, I learn to read. So they don't know those things. And so some of those things are taught. We teach children as grown-ups, even doing the little things that we were taught, which is, well, math is hard and not everybody's good at it. Reading takes time. We don't all have the same we send those messages. So part of the work that I'm doing with the Renton Innovation Zone is just having parents, kids, older siblings, just start talking about math and about reading. Just start talking about those challenges that they faced in school and how they met them, and talking about those with each other so that we get comfortable talking about those things. Sometimes, and I find this unfortunately true with women, is, we're very comfortable saying, I'm not good at math. I was never good at math. And then those who are good at math are afraid to say that, because why? We're not supposed to be good at math. And so just having those conversations where you're like, you know what, I actually am good at math. And the reason I'm good at math is because I'm good at problem solving. And that's the approach that I take with my work with children, with my work with parents and families, my work with educators. We all know how to solve problems. We all do. And math is just another problem to solve. Learning to read is another problem to solve. And we all solve problems. So that's what we've been doing with our work in the RIS.
I'm going to open it up to any audience questions. And just for a background, RISP is a collective group of the school district of Renton and community groups. So
yes,
from early learning.
It's a Renton Innovation Zone that serves 4 elementary schools in Renton and the families and all the partners that all serve those families.
Don't be shy. Feel free to unmute or in the chat box.
I'm allowing time for all of you reflective learners. Those are the processors. If you're familiar with learning styles, you got to think about stuff. You need time to reflect. You don't know necessarily what your questions are right away, but they'll come to you as soon as this is over, by the way.
Well, I guess with that, then I think what do we have, about 3 minutes, or are we timed? Joey, you give me
We've got about 2 minutes, but I did see someone pop off mute. Juanita, did you have a question?
It wasn't a question. It was more of I like how it was, how you put our personal, who we are. It's I'm going to sit down and talk to a person in my professional mode or me. So, and yeah, that was good. That was excellent. That was spot on. So yeah, thank you.
I see Angel has a hand up. Did you have a question, Angel?
Okay, yeah. I'm transporting a family right now to get some support. And the question, they're actually listening to this as we speak. And the question was, can you want to say it, or here you ask?
Hello. So my son was in South Shore, and now he has transferred to a different school, which is predominantly white. And he is having issues. He is behind with his reading. He's in the 3rd grade and doing online learning. I feel like his learning just stopped, and it reflects because his grade level that he's reading at is a late 1st grade. And I just want to know, how do I support him? And because he's going through so much with now, I feel like it's a culture shock, because how I explained it to the teachers is it's almost like he came from an HBCU and now he's in an Ivy League school. And, I am having trouble supporting him because not only do I have to support him with reading and writing and things like that, but also this new environment where he is being treated like he's just a villain, you know, after coming from an environment where he had to learn to protect himself.
Right. You know, I think part of what we always have to remember is that we have to be really, really clear. When a child is behind in terms of reading level, it is not the child's fault. It's the grown-up's fault. Pick whichever group of grown-ups you'd like, but it's the grown-up's fault. And what I find is that a child who is a year and a half or whatever behind in reading in one grade, when they go to the next grade, they're still a year and a half behind, but now they're a grade higher. So they might be in the 6th grade reading at a 4th grade level, then they're in the 7th grade reading at a 5th grade level. That means the child can learn how to read. What they need is more instruction and more support. So it is not impossible to catch a child up in terms of reading. They just need more support. So what we have to do is make sure that we don't turn a child's challenges into, now that's who they are, that becomes their name. The challenge can't become their name. Instead, the challenge is a problem to be solved. And we're educated grown-ups. Everybody here has a degree in something, and probably a couple. Our challenge is to solve the problem. And so if you work with that school in problem solving mode, then you're both on the same team. He can get caught up in anything. Everybody can. All of you went out and learned something you didn't know before. That's how you got your degrees. So you learn stuff. I see Christy has a hand up.
Yes, it's not really a question. I just wanted to say, as someone who is pursuing a master's degree in library and information sciences, that I really appreciate your work in developing a story that speaks to those things. It's really important that we have more stories like that.
Well, thank you very much. I think we need to keep telling these stories, because sometimes we hear the stories of how things didn't work out, or we hear the stories of what the problem is. And you can hear the story of the problem over and over and over and over. What we have to do is start telling the story of the solution. We have to start telling the story of our steps that we're going to, here's how I'm going to solve that.
Amen.
I'll say one more quick thing. I was trying to get a payment made through my bank that my bank said that they had sent, but the company said they didn't have it. And every time I would call, and you know, you call and your wait time is like 10 minutes, and then you finally get someone and they tell you you got the wrong someone, so they send you to someone else. And at some point, because I'd literally been on the phone for an hour, at some point I got transferred to some woman, and she said, "So what can I do for you?" And I'm thinking, I said, honestly, I said, "You are the 7th person that I've talked to in the last hour." And she said, "Well, you're in luck, because I'm lucky number 7. So we're going to solve the problem." And she did. So you just make yourself the lucky number whatever problem solver. We're here to solve the problem.
That's amazing. Thank you, Deborah. I'm not in direct service, but you just motivated me to go somewhere and go help somebody. So I will not be upset the next time I'm on hold for 20 minutes. We're gonna, thank you, Dr. Deborah Sullivan. Dr. Deborah Sullivan is here. I did a shameless plug for her link and her book. It's in the chat room, chat box. I think you may be staying on, so feel free to connect with her one-on-one. And if you want to learn a little bit about the work that she's doing with RISP and the roadmap, Rent Innovation Zone Partnership and the roadmap, feel free to connect with her directly. We are going to move on to Kayla, and Kayla will be, and another guest speaker. Kayla?
Thank you. And thank you so much, Dr. Sullivan. Before I get into this piece, I just want to lift up, since we're talking about stories and solutions and special education, I wanted to share about a student that I worked with in the past who was an unaccompanied youth, and he was labeled with the disability of emotional dysregulation. He was a Black boy in a largely white middle school, and that label stuck with him throughout his whole educational experience. And when we really picked out the pieces and started to problem solve, then it really was just his trauma and the racism that he was experiencing in the school setting that was causing the emotional dysregulation. And so just for any advocate on the call to just be really cognizant of the over diagnosis of disabilities like emotional dysregulation or ADHD for Black and Brown students, and how that contributes to the school to prison pipeline. And perhaps it just needs to be a longer conversation and that problem solving with the school rather than tracking them into special ed. So I just wanted to lift that up. But as far as special education and McKinney-Vento and how they intersect, special education provides specially designed instruction that addresses the unique needs of a student. So usually that, or it always includes an individualized education plan, also known as an IEP, which is a plan or program developed to ensure that a child who has a disability receives that specialized instruction. And I think for families that are experiencing homelessness, it's really helpful to have a support person there at those IEP meetings because it's a whole different language in those meetings. Even if, if English is their first language, the way that the IEPs are written can be extremely confusing. And I've heard often from families that they just feel rushed to or pressured to sign off on whatever the school says. And they have a right to appeal the decisions or the recommendations that are being brought forward, and they have a right to be a part of that process. And so just to partner with the special education department in your districts as McKinney-Vento liaisons or advocates to really break down what those IEP meetings are about and how they can have true and authentic family voice and student voice at the table because they have a right to be a part of their education as well. And the next slide, then we're going to talk about 504s, which can be confusing, the difference between a 504 and an IEP, but basically a 504 plan is accommodations and accessibility. So this might be a student has a disability and they don't necessarily need specialized instruction about it, but they might need some accommodations. So for example, I was working with a student that had social anxiety. So in her 504 plan, it said a teacher wouldn't call on her out the blue because that would provoke the social anxiety. And they worked out other solutions to still have her be part of the school community and the classroom community, but to be cognizant of those accommodations. Does anyone have any questions about that or any examples they'd like to share? Okay, well, feel free to put them in the chat. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to piggyback on you on how important it is to support the student when dealing with the IEP paperwork, because coming from experience, I as a student had experience being an IEP, and it was super challenging for my mom, who was an immigrant coming from a different place, understanding those paperwork and not realizing what dynamic and how it affected my education growing up. So yes, please sit there with your student and try to educate both the parent and the student about the IEP services and what they bring and everything basically. So kudos to you for letting them know that.
Thank you for sharing that, Alejandra. Yeah, I know that that's the experience of a lot of students and families in the schools. And I think it was pretty recently that it was required that IEPs and all of the supporting documents are required to be translated into the language that the family is most comfortable with. But for years that wasn't part of the best practice.
Yeah, I'm really happy it is now. So like I said, kudos to you for letting everybody know to support the student and the parent, because it is super, super important. Because I know that when I was growing up, it was really challenging for my parents and my family. family and myself dealing with school and an IEP and getting taken out of class and being on track. And it was really difficult. So it is, students do need that extra support just for them to understand exactly what IEP is.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing, Alejandra. Angel, I know that you're out there helping a family as you do. Are you able to speak right now?
Yes, ma'am. She just went into her appointment, so I'm sitting in the car.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, welcome to the one and only Miss Angel Graves. So excited that you're here. Angel and Marette and I worked together at Seattle Public Schools McKinney-Vento office 5 years ago now. So it's lovely to see you again, Angel. And Angel now works as a re-entry intervention specialist at Franklin High School. So if you could just share a bit about your experience and strategies. I know that I was always so impressed by the ways that you built relationships with families and really came through for families. So please, if you could just share some of your wisdom on how you do that.
Yes, Kayla, thank you for having me. And it's good to see all of you guys, Miss Deborah and Kayla and Marette, everybody. It's good to see you guys. You know, the thing you said, Kayla, is the relationship piece. And that's one thing I always pride myself on. And I guess to me, it's like second nature. So important to have that relationship because when families are in need or vulnerable, they never want to come forward because of the shame. You know, people looking at them as if they are less than or, you know, whatnot, being treated differently by staff in schools. And this is historically how it's been. So when they can connect to someone to be transparent and be vulnerable, I think that's important. And for me, one of the things that I do is I'm transparent myself. You know, I'm going to, you know, roll up my sleeves. And if I got to go down in the trenches with the family, I'm going to do that. I'm going to let them know that I'm there for them no matter what. Walk by them just like I'm doing right now. You know, this mother actually is having postpartum depression, and I had to, you know, get her to a hospital emergency room, and now this is a follow-up appointment. But just being there with the families, it's important. And I think another thing that's important is that we have to realize that kids go home. So just because you're working with a child at school, it doesn't stop there. It goes home, you know, the problem continues. And so we have to, you know, look at the root cause of the problem and see what we can do to fix the problem, you know, as a whole. You know, the initiative I work on right now is Whole Child, Whole Day. And, you know, you may say, oh, re-entry intervention specialist. No, but I am the 504 coordinator. I am the McKinney-Vento point of contact. I am the BSU advisor. I am all of these things, you know, in one. And it doesn't stop there. And why am I that? Because I can build that relationship with people, you know, build that relationship with students where they know they can come to me, they can count on me to do, you know, just about anything, whether it is sitting in the meeting with the IEP or the 504 and explaining, helping families advocate, you know, when they can't advocate for themselves, helping them navigate through school systems. Because a lot of times families are intimidated. They don't know the language. They don't know what to do. So I think it all, again, goes back to that relationship piece, Taylor.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And I know you wear a million hats wherever you go because you're so good at what you do. So I want to lift up one thing that you said about the student clubs that you support. And if you could just talk about ways that you've partnered with like student clubs or SPED or McKinney-Vento to advocate for inclusionary practices.
I mean, that's nonstop for me. You know, I go hard, you know, I'm sorry, but I take everything personal. Like, you know, Miss Deborah was saying, you know, Dr. Deborah, I was, you know, I'm on like it's my family, like it's my children, like it's me. I partner with McKinney-Vento, and, you know, like I was saying earlier, there's so many things that, you know, McKinney-Vento program can offer that people aren't aware of, you know, like the, you know, it's not just transportation. you know, but it's transportation for families as well. If a family needs to get to a meeting and they don't have the transportation, McKinney-Vento will pay for that. The cap and gowns for seniors, you know, fines and fees, okay? And that's just the McKinney-Vento program, but let's go through the IEP process. You know, I meet kids all the time, and, you know, one of the stories that I love to share is that when I first got to Franklin, one of my first students I interacted with was a junior, and she's actually of East African descent. And, you know, she was telling me that she can't read. She said, "I can't read, Miss Angel, I can't read." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she said, she continued to go on, "I can't read," you know, and they would say, "Oh, there's language barriers with her mom and all these things." And so I got to know her, and I wanted to open up. I said, "Well, do you have an IEP?" She said, "No." She said, "Well, they continue to put me in ELL classes all my life, but I was born here." And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Anyways, to make a long story short, this baby was on a 2nd grade reading level, but she was a junior, okay? Now, what I had done was get her tested. She had never been tested, right? She had never had an IEP, or she had never had anything. Come to find out, she was dyslexic, okay? She was suffering from anxiety, absolutely, but she was dyslexic. And once she got the right resources, you know, figured out what was really going on, because it wasn't the fact that she couldn't read, but she saw stuff, you know, differently. And right now she's about to graduate. So now through her whole junior year, through her whole senior year, we got her the supports that she needed to be successful. We got her an IEP, got her into actually a different school where she was supported with all of her coding and all the things that she had been missing throughout her educational experience. But the thing that stuck out with me the most was the self-advocacy piece. You know, she was advocating for herself, but steadily getting, you know, nowhere, because she didn't have that person advocating with her. So I think, you know, I'm thankful for myself being put in that situation to be able to help her and the family. I mean, they're so thankful now. She's about to go to college. I mean, all these things are happening for her, but just the right resources and connecting with the right people at the right time make a huge difference. Another connection is, like right now I stand with the Black Student Union. I'm the Black Student Union advisor. And, you know, one of the things I've been working on this year, and I'm starting at Franklin, but we're going to go throughout the district, because there's a grave need for 1st and 2nd generation immigrants to be supported in our district, and they're not. And, you know, it's not okay. And so I think, you know, that we have to do better, you know, because they are counted in the numbers of the Black students. However, they're not receiving the resources that they need to be successful. So that's something I've been working on. I've been working with a few community-based organizations, trying to, you know, bring people into the building to do some things, you know, working on financial literacy, just trying to do some things to get some tools in the kids' toolbox so that they can be successful. So that's just, I can go on and on and on, but I'm going to end it.
I love that story that you highlighted, because it really shows that, you know, on paper, you see one thing, but if you take the time to build the relationship and you get those stories that we've been talking about, then it opens up a whole other, you know, realm of opportunities and different pathways that you can go on with the student alongside them to get them the services that they needed. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if anyone has questions for Miss Angel Graves, please put them in the chat or come on off mute. This is a real hard hitter in the advocacy world. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you a little bit about, you were just commenting on regards to supporting 2nd generation students. How are you finding, or how are you working with your district about that? Because I am a 2nd gen or 1st generation. My son will be 2nd generation. And I personally I have a hard time navigating financial literacy for college and future education. Oh, do you have to take that?
Sorry.
Or
no, I'm
you're
fine.
fine. How are you working with the district about that? Like, what are some ideas that you can provide? I see it a lot in our high schools here. I'm at Bellingham School District, and attending college is already very difficult. However, for second generation, because they don't have that support and the knowledge from the first generation parent here. So they would be like the first generation attending further education. And it seems like there's a huge gap. People think, oh, well, you know, you already speak English and you already know how to navigate the system. However, navigating the whole process all the way through, even though it lays on the counselor at school, but sometimes it just seems that there's a gap of information that it's not relayed to where the person can understand it truly and freely. That's what I learned.
Yes, and you are absolutely right. One of the things that, you know, I like to start with the family engagement piece, because I believe that the communication gap makes a huge difference. You know, and it's not translating things into a language, but it's helping them understand. So what I've been doing right now is reaching out to families and getting families involved, and, you know, helping the kids also in the sense that, you know, making them feel like they're welcome. So that's the first thing, is connecting with those kids. You know, I'm gonna step outside the car real fast because this baby is crying. So getting connected with the kids, we have to get connected with the kids on a personal level so that they feel welcome, you know, so that they know that you're there. They have to know the people are there. I've been, there's an agency, it's called Bridging Cultural Gaps. And they've been coming into Franklin every week. And we have been meeting with this group of kids, and we're working on a lot of things. We're working on financial literacy. We're working on SAT, because one of the things that the kids talked about was the fact that, you know, it's not until their senior year that they know that they have to take an SAT, and that's not okay. And then the anxiety comes, and then, you know, that can lead to depression, and then it goes on and on and on. So if we can get the kids in a space where they feel comfortable to open up and talk about their needs, because that's the only way that we can meet their needs, if we know what they are. And I think that it's too often that we don't know what the needs are, and we're saying what we think the kids need, and that's not what the kids need. So we have to work first, creating a welcoming environment for the kids, making them feel like they have a place to go to, and knowing that somebody's going to be there to support them, not just listening, you know, or hearing. I'm going to say hearing, because I say listening is an action. And when we listen, we act on things that we hear. So, you know, creating the space where the kids can come to, and having a person there, a body that they know that they can trust. And then moving forward, you know, connecting with community-based organizations that can come in and help, you know, whether it's, like I say, right now, one of the things I'm working on is with the East African communities. And, you know, it was difficult at first. I reached out to Moretta a while ago, you know, because I'm like, girl, what can I do, you know, to bridge this gap? You know, these kids' needs aren't being met, and they're in the hallways wandering around because they don't feel like they're in a welcoming environment. Okay. I have a large population of Hispanic students at Franklin High School that are not coming to school, period. And then when we try to connect with them and communicate with them, it's not working either, because the parents are not answering the phones, or maybe they are homeless, or, you know, whatever the case may be. But again, providing the space, providing a welcoming environment, and letting them know that you are there to help them and support them throughout the way. It's important. And reach out to the community-based organizations, because there are a lot of them out there willing to come and support. And I'm working on some things right now, because this is what I want to work with the district. We need to support these families, and we don't have the funding really to do all the things we want to do. So I'm working on right now, trying to get some grants so that we can move forward in a larger realm, versus just helping, you know, a small population of students, but reaching all the students to our district, you know? So it's important.
Thank you so much, Angel. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and your wisdom. We're really grateful that we have you here today. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I am just having so much love for our speakers today. Thank you so much for joining us. Going to quickly touch on another program that is available for McKinney-Vento students that is can be a really great opportunity. So looking at career and technical education. So this has come through the 21st Century Act, which was signed into law. There, I'm going to drop information on that. And I'm also dropping a link to why career and technical education may be a perfect fit for students experiencing homelessness. You can see a lot up on the screen here, but important things to highlight is CTE can be a way for McKinney-Vento students to earn credit and potentially an income through work-based learning. So this could be a really great opportunity for our students to still work through their education while also making sure that some of their other needs, be that income, be met. And also set them up for an opportunity for employment and whatever their career may be afterwards. So other important things to highlight with this, because they are McKinney-Vento identified students, that is where we can come in and make sure that the fees, fines, and deadlines are waived to increase access for and participation of eligible students. And when I say deadlines, you know, you can work with the people running the CTE program to be like, all right, we know they're supposed to register 2 weeks ago. Now, how can we get them into this program, right? So really using that role that you have as an advocate to make sure these students are connected. And I'm dropping those links now. Sorry, I said drop links and then I didn't drop them. I'm gonna pass it off to Marette.
I saw raised hands, so just wanna.
She said she was gonna drop links and I realized it probably answers the question I have. My husband's a CTE teacher and I've never heard of Job Connection. So I was hoping that there was gonna be something that was shared that might help me understand that a little bit more, because that's exciting and I had no idea.
So I may have spoken in a way that said there was a program that wasn't as it is. So thinking about if they're doing these career and technical programs, and then it's getting them training to be able to connect into career and jobs. And, you know, depending on the program, they might have connections to local companies that are hiring CTE students, right? And that also may not be the case in all situations. So not a guaranteed, but the goal of CTE is that they have the training to be able to enter into those careers.
All right, we are gonna move on. And I just wanna address two things as it's blended to Special Education 504 and ELL. We talked about gaining language access in schools, and that law that was passed was House Bill 1153. Governor Jay Inslee has signed it, it's approved. And so it's increasing language access to public schools. So it's allowing translation of materials, it's bringing in community translators, it's allowing credential translators to be to work in partnership. So there shouldn't be any barriers to any documentation. And there's funding that's also attached to it. So if you feel like language access and funding is a concern, or there's been some barriers in access, and I think I saw something up top about the huge Chukis population that moved into a community and trying to sustain or keep on-site translator. So feel free to reach out to me or us at Building Changes, and we can strategize on what that can look like and bring in some community partners, because language access and anything accessibility is very important to us. So I do want to share that. And then I think there was a question around driving minors, and every district is different. Within a district, every district and school building and its role is very different. I will say I have in my capacity as a student success liaison, family support worker, McKinney-Vento, driven both minors and families, but it took a lot of extensive processing, background check, providing car insurance, driver's license, updating with any changes that are made with the vehicle and my employment. It's getting approval, a field trip form, you know, the principal is aware that the family student's going off site. And when I used to work in Renton, we used to have a Walmart MOU where we would provide every McKinney-Vento student with a Walmart voucher. That's $110. And you have to accompany them. And oftentimes we'd like the parent or guardian or advocate to join us, or additional teachers. Sometimes I would have the nurse come with me, but there's oftentimes where that's not possible and the kid doesn't have clothes at all. And so it's a process, a very clear process where safety of you and the child and the family is very clear and consistent. The liability is addressed. So, and again, defensive driving courses. So it's not just bringing someone in your car and you're ready to go. It's a process that your district and your school building leader has put into place and updating those materials as much as possible. So again, if you don't have that process, it may be a good time to start, because you would hate for a child to miss out on an opportunity of going to get clothes, especially the opportunity of getting new clothes at one, getting clothes that they don't have and shopping because the process is not in place. So I always feel like there's always an exception to a rule. So there is always a way. There is not a way. And leaning on your community-based organizations, we had the Assistant League of Washington that always assisted us as well. So moving on to English language learner, we also have a guest speaker. So I'm gonna kind of go through this so you guys have the opportunity to hear from Raluca at International Rescue Committee. So English language learners are students who are unable to communicate fluently or learn effectively in English, who often come from non-English speaking homes and backgrounds, and who typically require specialized or modified instructions in both the English language and in their academic courses. Students who identify English language learners might be immigrants from countries all over the world seeking educational or economic opportunities, refugees from war-torn countries, children with well-developed literacy skills in a first language, teenagers with low prior to formal schooling, children of university students or international students at the university. ELL comes from a very, English language learner, ELL comes from a very linguistic background. Some migrants may qualify for language learners, but not all. I'm dropping a link on the migrant education program because there are provisions in providing them with supports that are a little different. Again, this is utilizing additional services to meet their needs. So it's a and, not an either or. So dropping that just so you have more information on migrant education, because I won't be able to go fully into that. As a McKinney-Vento liaison, building point of contact, advocate, your advocacy in supporting immediate enrollment is necessary. Immediate enrollment, even lacking documentation, normally required for enrollment, not asking for documentation that's not present. At the end of the day, you're providing them with the educational opportunity, which is their civil rights. Receive educational services comparable to those provided to all students according to the student needs. Advocating where you may see some placements. I think we just heard Angel talk about a student who was born in America, comes from a different country, speaks different languages, was placed in English language learners, but through her advocacy realized she actually needed some special education, individualized support. So there's some blind spots that we can support in getting to know the family and the students. Contact and communicate with ELL or migrant families in their native language when necessary. Again, you have the House Bill 1153 as your backup. Children who may not be eligible in need of educational services provided by the McKinney-Vento Act. Also, connecting with community is really important, and you yourself as an individual. I think in our breakout activity group, we talked about what the different demographics and populations look like in your community. And a couple have shared huge refugee populations coming to the community and not knowing how to support them, but wanting to support them. So in that, we are going to introduce our guest speaker, Raluca from the International Rescue Committee. Raluca, are you here? I think I saw you in the chat box.
Yeah, I am. Hi.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. And we're going to go straight to the first question. Talk to us about your experience and strategies on providing supports to students, refugee and immigrant students during this time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, actually, sorry. Let me back up. Tell us a little bit about the International Rescue Committee, your work, and then the strategies of how you've been working with school districts.
Yeah, I'm very happy to. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Raluca. I'm working with the International Rescue Committee in Seattle. We are a large agency working internationally, but also in US. In US specifically, we're working in resettlement of refugees So with refugees primarily, but also with immigrants and asylum seekers. And in Washington State, we are working, especially since last year in October, mostly with Afghan refugees. And I'm particularly working with the Education Access and Family Engagement Program in the Youth and Education team. And in my program, what we are working on is mostly in connecting parents with the education system. Here, when they arrive, helping them that they have an easy transition, that they build connections with the school system overall, with teachers, staff, that they, like a lot, like Angel mentioned, that they have the tools to support their kids, that they have the information, that they know what is asked of them, and they want to be involved. So that's really a big part of what we're doing. And yeah, so we have several programs that we do, that we offer to both schools and families. We see our role a lot as a bridge between schools, school districts, and families. So one of the things that we do is school enrollment. And you know, to some might seem like an easy, straightforward thing, or to some might be complicated. From our experience, we're working with refugee and immigrant families, particularly refugees, because these days we're working a lot with refugees. When you think about it, right, a refugee usually is a person that they run from their country with not a lot of documentation, not a lot of personal things, right? So while for enrollment, usually you need to submit a lot of documents. So that's usually an area where they need a lot of support and advocacy. And we're working with school districts on this, on advocating for families and making sure that when they arrive here, they can be enrolled in school as soon as possible, because that's very important for their stability, for reducing, well, I don't know if you can reduce, but definitely helping with the trauma they have been through, for stability and all that. So that's one thing that we do. And with school enrollments, we do both school enrollment when the family is already in a permanent address. So they have a copy of the lease. So let's say that's the most straightforward option. But we also support with McKinney-Vento enrollment. And with that one, it's not that easy, I would say, because we usually see families that, let's say they are in 1 month or a bit over 1 month, maybe even 2 months in temporary housing. So they qualify for being enrolled under McKinney-Vento. But what we've seen in the last half year or so since we've been doing these, school districts are not always prepared, have the knowledge on how to enroll refugee kids under McKinney-Vento. So it takes a long time to do this. And by the time it's all done, they already are in their permanent address. And it's a lot of back and forth between the school and us, and a lot of advocacy on behalf of the family. But you know, in the end, it's worth it. So we try whatever just to make sure that the kids are in school as soon as possible. Yeah, so that's one of the things. Other things that we do, once the kids are in school, we go back to supporting the parents, right? So as soon as possible, after a few weeks or so, ideally, we set up a meeting with the school, which is called like school orientation. And in that one, basically, we join the parents for a meeting at the school with the family liaison. That's the coordinator of the meeting. And then we invite there also the school counselor, the social worker, the EL teacher. Ideally, the principal stops by, and this is basically a meeting to welcome the family, to gradually introduce them to the new school system, to, you know, for them to become comfortable seeing where the kids are going to school, seeing the building, you know, all those things. So that's been proven to be really useful, and families really appreciate it. And we have really good collaboration with a few school districts where we're working in South King County. And at the same time, we're building the relationship with other schools. So that's also a working process in some areas, but very satisfying, I would say. Some other things that we do for families, well, not I wouldn't say for, but some other things that we do is we see like when families arrive here, refugee families, again, they don't have that much technical skills or digital literacy skills, and that's a lot needed these days. So they need that interacting with the school system a lot, like from emails to accessing the school portal to parents portal, everything. So we have a program where we connect parents with what we call them digital tutors. Like sometimes they are even former clients that they speak their language. So they can help them with things, digital things related to connecting with the school. So that's really wonderful. And again, as Angel mentioned about that family, we also have to see, especially in this last wave of Afghan families, but not only, we see situations with families where they are illiterate in their own language. So that's a bit of a situation where there's more support needed. And usually with that, as you can imagine, it's a bit difficult to connect them with, online things, but having a tutor that speaks their language really super helpful. So that's another thing that we do. And I would say, lastly, one thing that we try to do is being in touch as much as possible with schools and both with families and offering our availability, like whenever they get stuck with some communication things or things that are not, totally comfortable for the families with the schools, or the schools needs to get in touch with the family and then they don't manage to do that, or there are situations where they see that the schools are not having a good adjustment to the school in the first few weeks, they can reach out to us and we can connect further the family with different services in our IRC office. We have several office services for intensive case management, or for health support, or for rent, or for all kinds of things. So employment and things. So that's been really, really successful as well. So yeah, I think that's about it in a nutshell. Hope I didn't take too much time.
Thank you, really good. I'm going to open it up to guest questions. We have about 4 minutes before our next speaker. Sorry, kind of running tight back to back, but I wanted to open up to ask Raluca any questions. We did share that there's an expansion to a Spokane office, so there is access to the services, but they do statewide work. So
yes, thank you for mentioning that. I forget about that because they're pretty new, but yeah, they're actually starting very soon.
It looks like we do have a question in the chat that I would be happy to read out loud. It's from Janelle. So are you aware of any programs or groups that can help families navigate websites that are only in English, but very important for their students' education? So she's giving an example of the time that our son changed their iPad to Japanese and it took weeks to figure out how to change it back. And because they know how to use the device, that's not helpful if everything is in a language that they don't understand.
Yeah, so basically so far, like, of course, the good old Google Translate, that's what a lot of our families are doing. And I know it's not ideal at all. We receive that feedback from families, especially when schools are sending information home translated with Google Translate. Apparently, sometimes it's a fiasco. It's absolutely something that they don't understand. And yeah, in these situations, what we, as part of our digital tutorship program, that's one of the things that our tutors help with, or navigating the website. But unfortunately, we can offer that only for families that have been, so far at least, that families that have been resettled only by IRC.
I just think of like Skyward, and it's overwhelming for me, and I'm a mom and I'm an educator.
I know. We did some trainings with that, one thing that we tried last year, especially when, we are in the pandemic and that families relied a lot on that. We did some trainings on Skyward with using an interpreter for the language, for Ukrainian, for Dari, and we just went to the portal. So we scheduled some meetings with the schools, and we provide an interpreter, and we invited families. And in that meeting, we just took them like section by section and try to explain like this is about that, this is about that, and yeah. And I'm not sure. I think some sections can be translated. Like there's a system there in Skyward to translate also in other languages, I think. Or it depends probably by district, what languages. For Auburn, I know for sure they were able to do at least with some section that for Ukrainian. And Spanish, I think also, yeah.
I'll have to look into that.
I just came to chime in the importance of engaging your 4BI organizations as a partner to your school district. This is where they can come in. There's many ethnic organizations that would love to partner with school buildings, having culturally responsive, thinking about the fall open house teacher conference and adding a language that not just interpretation, but prior engagement in language access is really important. So I do want, as you're thinking about your ecosystem, including IRC, who are the languages and what ethnic community centers surround your schools and your school district, and what's the level of engagement and how you can strengthen that?
All right, just again, Raluca, it is always such a pleasure to have you in spaces with us. Thank you for bringing your knowledge and advocacy for so many families. We really are glad that we have you in our network of folks. So we are going, I'm doing a quick time check. So we're at 11:40 and we have 2 speakers left. So we're gonna try and keep each speaker to about 10 minutes or less to leave like a last minute, me checking out with everyone and just dropping some links in the chat at the very end. So if you can hang tight, that would be great. And I'll pass it off to Sammy to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Joey. Just to get us kind of pivoted to talk about a different population now. We're covered a lot of ground today. I just wanted to say that we know some people identifying as queer and or gender nonconforming or LGBTQ+ face unique challenges and barriers when it comes to navigating their education and housing crisis. As a past MKV or McKinney-Vento liaison, was hired to focus specifically on housing and community resources. Many of the unaccompanied youth I'd worked with shared experiences of feeling misunderstood, felt unseen or unheard, and lacked trust in the systems that serve them. Some of those students also didn't trust the adults that they came in contact with. It was common to hear that their housing crisis was often invalidated or not taken seriously, and that returning home was often recommended even when they had left because it was unsafe. We know every student and family experience is unique. This has been said in so many incredible ways today. So I just wanted to say it's important to consider the layers and the complexities involved. Many students we're working with do not fit in just one of these programs mentioned today, could benefit from many of them. So it's on us to really help ease access to these resources and supports, listen with compassion, embody willingness to show up, and know when you're outside your wheelhouse. It's okay to have that awareness, as Marette brought in, to lean on, collaborate, and learn from community partners who really hold that expertise in serving the specific populations we've highlighted today. Again, with the next few minutes, I would love to highlight Anna McGree joining us today from Yakima Neighborhood Health Services, the LGBTQ+ and Anchor Communities Initiative Coordinator, as well as the Youth Services Team Lead. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're just going to kick it off with asking, please share a little bit about your role and how you're working with schools and school districts currently.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm joining through my phone because my Zoom is all sorts of messed up. So I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay, we can.
Cool. New technology for me. So my role at Yakima Neighborhood Health is, I have a couple of different roles. So I coordinate the space, which is an LGBTQ resource center. So we're able to kind of serve those youth in an intentional way. And part of that is kind of reaching out to the schools and connecting them on our resources, as well as kind of educating them on the LGBTQ and helping them meet the needs of the students as well. Annie, you're frozen.
I hope not. That's
okay.
Zoom always makes it fun for us. So I would love, Anna, if you want to highlight a little bit about like how Yakima Neighborhood Health Services in your role, you're providing, targeted or tailored approaches to serving students. Maybe what barriers or successes you're running into or you're seeing in your community.
So with reaching out to schools, a big part of it is advocating for the youth and kind of sharing their rights with the school as well, so they're also educated on it. I think something that's worked very well with targeting this particular population and just youth in general is before you meet with them and talk about housing and what their specific needs and wants are, always asking their pronouns. That kind of sets the stage for this is a safe place and knowing that their gender is taken seriously and it's a big part of who they are. The other thing that's really helpful is using a diversion model. So really listening to what the students want and kind of exploring options of their housing off of that, not going into the conversation telling them what they need to do in order to be housed. That also kind of sets the stage for allowing the students to be heard and put at the forefront.
Anna, sorry about that pause. Are there any kind of specific barriers or successes that you'd like to highlight today with the group?
Yeah, I think barriers in, so as another part of my job as the ACI coordinator, I get to look at the data across the county. And I think some of the barriers are we don't have an equitable system. So LGBTQ population isn't always represented in our data. And that can be for a lot of different reasons. I think a lot of youth may not feel safe sharing their gender identity, or they may not feel like they're going to get housing because they identify as that. So kind of changing that has been hard, but we're working on it and realizing that it's not an equitable system yet.
Thanks so much, Anna. I think that it's great to really hear the pieces that you're mentioning and knowing that a lot of the populations we've mentioned today are living with different stigmas that our systems have put on them, figuring out really how to both acknowledge that and work through it and focus on change, making that change, even if it doesn't always happen as fast as we'd like to see it. At this moment, we have about 2 minutes. Anyone in the room have questions specifically for Anna? Feel free to pop in or go into chat if you have them. I'm going to take the pause as maybe we need a couple moments, or also feel free to follow up with any of us if you have additional questions and we can get them to Anna or get you in contact with her. But in getting us moving forward with our time, Anna, thank you so much again for joining us and popping in. I am going to go ahead and hand the presentation now over to Kayla. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. So we are going to welcome Jason Lafontaine next from the Puget Sound Educational Service District. Welcome, Jason. If you could just, knowing that representation matters, could you just tell us about yourself and your role at PSESD?
Sure. Thank you all for having me on here today. I love the spot right before lunch, right? Everybody's listening and eager. So I'll try to be brief as best I can. Hello, my name is Jason Lafontaine. I'm an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, which is a small reservation in north central North Dakota. My father is Robert Lafontaine, and my grandparents are Henry Lafontaine and Genevieve Blue, who my grandma, who just celebrated her 101st birthday yesterday, or this past weekend. She's our precious elder. On my mother's side, I'm Swedish and Italian. A little bit about me. My grandparents left the reservation during kind of what was known as the Federal Relocation Act, which is the time when the government's really pushed and promoted for Native people to leave the reservation, primarily because of the fewer people on the reservation and the fewer tax dollars that the government would have to budget for education, for medical, for housing, and other social services. So my family chose Seattle, and in 1955, and we've kind of been out here ever since. So I grew up kind of in Seattle as this multiracial student growing up in the heart of Seattle over by the Space Needle. And somehow through the grace of God over the last, my second career, I became the program manager for the Puget Sound Educational Service District Native American Education Program. And what our program does is we serve about 500 students with Native American heritage in 4 Pierce County school districts. Also do some other work with other programs, other agencies. I have a lot of colleagues. If you guys are in different school districts, your school district may have an Indian Ed Title VI program. So we work a lot. I work a lot with some of my colleagues from basically all over Western Washington and some in Eastern Washington. The way I kind of show up authentically for my students is I'm just there for them. I'm there for them consistently. I build up relationships, sometimes incredibly fast, and some that last 6 or 7 years, because we don't just see them in elementary or middle school. We kind of stay with them the whole way. So I have students graduating this year that I've known since 5th grade when I started kind of working with them. So it's really kind of, you just build up that relationship. And we do that by providing direct service support in as many of the schools as we can get to, where we do lessons with videos, with pictures, with conversations, with PowerPoints, just connecting with them, just so they can see that their culture is represented in the classroom, in the building. I like to say they don't have to leave their culture at the door when they walk through that school building. And oftentimes I think one of the big things we've been doing lately is kind of just sharing contemporary information with them. They're seeing that we are still here. We're educators, we're businessmen, we're actors, we're scientists, we're photographers. There's even I don't know if you call them supermodels, or there is a famous model out there who's doing all kinds of different work, and she totally shines with her Native heritage in the work that she does. I'm authentic, I think, because I kind of see myself in those students. Most of my students are multiracial, and they have that Native connection, but they may not, quote unquote, look Native to the perception of what teachers and classmates might picture a Native person. So a lot of times our teachers don't even know who the Native students are in the school. Our students kind of live in fairly urban areas where basically they're about 2% of the population. So our program provides kind of them a safe space to learn and explore about what it means to be Native in their world, and they're growing up in a totally different time than we did, than our grandparents did. So it's really awesome to be able to work with them, and parents are very appreciative of the program. They often say that one of the favorite memories of their school years was when they went to a Native American Title VI program back in the 70s and 80s, so and 90s. So myself and my staff, we're likely the only Native educator that these students are ever going to have in their K-12 experience. It's just the way it is. There aren't very many Native teachers out there. So we take that role very serious. We're part teacher, we're part role model. Sometimes we're part confidant, mentor, kind of a friend. We are just there to be with them and know that their culture is honored. I have, like I said, I have a student who I just started working with about 2 months ago, and I've only seen him twice. And I was on a Zoom call with his mom, and she had the speaker on, and the student, he's the first grader, could hear my voice, and he recognized my voice immediately and goes, "It's Mr. Jason, it's Mr. Jason." And he gets on and he waves, and now I just imagine that over the course of several years, to continue to work with him. So I think that's just kind of how I try to be authentic with them. And like I said, they get to see a Native person working with them in the class, in the school building, which is pretty rare.
Thank you so much for sharing that important work that you're doing. And I was curious if there's ways that the McKinney-Vento program could support the Native Ed programs in our schools.
Sure. So I think the first thing extremely important would be as data sharing. I think many of our Native students may show up as more than one race in your district data, which would not alert the McKinney-Vento people that they should reach out to the Native Ed program and let us know that, hey, here's a student we're trying to work with. Do we know them? Do I know the family? Can I help work, kind of help partner with everybody to get the best possible outcome? Many of our Native students kind of are literally invisible because maybe the non-Native parent signs them up, enrolls them in school, but does not mark that they have Native heritage. So we just really need to work with all the different resources that we have within the district to find who our Native students are, and because sometimes they're invisible even though they're right in front of us. And if I have McKinney-Vento staff make sure that they have kind of a historical and cultural understanding of Native people, I think it goes a long way in helping to understand and support those students and families, because there is a lot of historical mistrust on the part of Native families towards institutions, especially education. There's a lot of historical trauma with boarding schools, with the taking of Native children and placing them with white families, all the way up into the 1970s and the 1980s. So there's a lot of mistrust about things like that. So, and also, if you're not sure, I would also encourage you to see if your district has a federal Title VI Indian Ed program. It sounded like somebody said they were in Auburn, so obviously there's Robin Pratt in the Auburn School District. And if there is none, then you have to kind of work with your data folks to see which students you have that may have Native heritage. And you can always reach out to me at the Puget Sound ESD. I have an email address there if you ever have any questions or some, just kind of looking to partner. So.
Thank you, Jason. If anyone has questions, feel free to shout them out or put them in the chat in these last few minutes we have. But I was just curious, I know that you're probably no stranger to the red tape and bureaucracy that we experience in school districts. And if you just have any strategies to share of how you advocate for inclusionary practice in the school district.
Sure. So it's very important to work with our upper level district administrators to kind of them and the school district leadership, or I'm sorry, the school leadership, kind of so they're centered in their work and using culturally responsive curriculum for Native students, making sure that they know who their Native students are, making sure that the teachers who work with them all the time have been trained in the OSPI Office of Native Education. They have a curriculum called the Since Time Immemorial, which is a Native education curriculum that's K-12, that we are really pushing for all teachers who, I guess all teachers who should take that training. It's a one-day training. Try to have your Native representation on the curriculum standards review. I'm doing that with the Sumner School District right now, and I'm doing it with the Peninsula School District. Just having a voice, representation matters. If we're not in that room, we can't ask those questions. We have a new Secretary of the Interior for the first time ever. She's a Native American woman, and she's been really important. She's giving us representation. She is looking at what's going on with today. There was just a big story about, there was a report out on the boarding school. They did a whole report on the boarding school issues from 1890 to 1970, and they found again several mass graves. And this is all because we have a Native person in office saying, hey, we need to look at this. This hasn't happened before because we never had a Native person in there, so people wouldn't take it as seriously. She's like, as soon as it happened in Canada last year, she's like, we need to look at what happened here in the United States. So again, representation matters. Classroom, make sure your lessons are good, but also having classroom presentations, bringing in Native speakers, Native elders, have us on the equity and diversity committees. There's different places for us, not only the work that we do directly with the students, but also getting, at the different levels of the district to support our needs.
Thank you.
And also, of course, reaching out to your local tribe and working with them. If you're near Yakima, you really should be working with the Yakima people. And my school districts are all here on the traditional lands of the Puyallup people, so we have a relationship with them. It's time to not be siloed. It's time to definitely work with all the different people you can to help uplift our Native students and families.
Thank you, Jason. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your expertise, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Just another huge thank you to all of our speakers today. You are all incredible, and thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom. So dropping a couple links in the chat here as we wrap up. The links are to the Survey Monkey. Please be sure to fill that out. Again, your feedback is very valued. We really do look at it and make changes based on it. If you are pursuing clock hours, please be sure to do the survey in PD Enroller. It is the same survey, so just do it in one spot or the other. Clock hours has to be in PD Enroller. Come join our School Housing Network. That is a monthly meeting that we host. Our next meeting is actually tomorrow. And that's with school and housing providers across the state. And it's a time to continue some of the conversations that we have in these trainings and also share learnings and resources. And then I also included the link to our future trainings. We're in the process of solidifying our upcoming dates for the next couple of months. So kind of over the summer and into fall. So keep an eye out there, and we'll also be sharing it through all the different venues we normally do. And then up on the screen, you can see our contact information. If you have any questions, I've also made sure to include the Homeless Ed team's email. They are a wonderful resource. You saw Melinda popping into the chat with a lot of knowledge. So please reach out to them if you have other questions as well. And that is our presentation for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all again.